Okay, we're recording. Having a little bit of trouble on my computer today. I'm on my phone, so I'm teaching on my computer. No, I'm having trouble on my computer, so I'm teaching on my phone. It is Wednesday, February 17th, 2021. It is the 5th of Adar. Oops, sorry, hang on a minute. I am having technical difficulties. There we go. It is the 5th of Adar of 5781, which means we are in the month of Adar, which is the month of Purim, which is a really great month. I'm trying to get the light out of the area here, but I don't think that's going to happen. Hopefully my computer will go back on and then I won't look so strange like I do right now. Okay. This is Spiritual Fitness Wednesdays with the Jewish Experience. And we meet here every Wednesday at 3 p.m. And we are studying from the book Revel in Emunah, which is the translation of Re'eh Emunah, which is a deep and inspiring journey through Rambam's 13 principles of Emunah based on the Shiurim, the classes of Rabbi Moshe Shapiro of blessed memory. And we are getting ready to start the actual first tenet. I believe we are like there. I'm just going to read what we read. I think we read this last week. Attaining wisdom only through the acceptance of absolute truth, but I'm just going to read that right now because I think it's a good headway into the, oh, my computer's ready now. It's a good leeway into the first tenet. But for today, for now, let me just do this. And of course, you can ask questions, interrupt me with either the chat or the, just unmute yourself. And then also you, anybody who's listening to this after, when it's recorded, if you're watching the recording, you can always WhatsApp me at 972-740-6306. It's an American number, 972-740-6306. And you can always WhatsApp me or email me at theje.com. And I think I'm going to go back on my computer if you can hear me. Let's see if you can hear me. Give me 1 second. Can you hear me? Hang on. Can you hear me? You can hear me. You can't hear me. I hear me. Wait a minute. Wait. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Oh, yay. Okay, I fixed it. See, this is better. All right. Okay, this is much better. I'm so happy that we got this taken care of. Okay, so attaining wisdom only through the acceptance of absolute truth. And we've been speaking about imagination. This was something that Rav Moshe wanted to address before we went into discussing the tenets of the 13 principles, because we need to understand what it means to have a human mind and an imagination, and how the imagination works, and how the imagination is something that we actually have to be very careful about. I'm just going to fix my screen so I don't have a glare. I'm just having so many issues today. But that's going to be better, I think. Okay, let's just rip my scarf. All righty, here we go. Oh yeah, that's a little bit better, at least. A little bit better. Okay,
Maybe not. Okay, so he says, in order to live a life based on belief in God, we must free ourselves from the control of the imagination, which limits our awareness to a world of images. So he's saying you have to understand that our imagination will make us, we have this imagination, which is a world of images. It's a world of pictures in our mind. We have to free ourselves from the control of the imagination, which means to be aware that it does play with our minds, our imagination, which limits our awareness to a world of images, and enter the world of knowledge. Wisdom teaches a person to reflect and candidly admit absolute truth will never be self-attained, even if I invest my whole life in the quest. Okay. I can comprehend only the truth of a particular moment, but knowledge of the absolute truth necessitates a much greater body of knowledge that is not within my intellectual grasp. I am bound to a greater and all-encompassing truth, which is beyond my comprehension. This is so humbling. It's so humbling, but it's so powerful. We're saying that, okay, this glare is driving me crazy. Hold on a second, I have one more idea. One more idea, hopefully it'll work. Oh, helped a little bit, I think, maybe not. Oh, he's so dark. I think I just have to live with the glare. Okay, next time I'll wear my contact lenses. It's so humbling, but it's so powerful. Why is it powerful? Because it's telling us that here's the secret to living in truth and to living in reality and to not getting caught up in our imagination and stories that our mind is going to tell us. So many people, we live in our own stories. My husband and I call it filling in the blanks. You know, we'll make assumptions. We don't even realize it. We make assumptions about things all the time because we're filling in the blanks. We don't know the whole story. Why? We're using our imagination. We're not going on knowledge. Maybe we didn't ask questions, you know, or we see somebody walking down the street and we just make a story up in our mind about what maybe the story is that they have more money than I do, or maybe the story is that they're whatever. I can't even think they have a better job, or nobody can have a better job than me because teaching Torah and helping people with their lives, like what better is that? But anyway, but we just fill in the blanks sometimes without asking questions, very often without asking questions. And he's saying here, be careful, make sure we go on knowledge, and not just any knowledge, but true knowledge, which is the Torah. I can comprehend only the truth of a particular moment, but knowledge of the absolute truth necessitates a much greater body of knowledge that is not within my intellectual grasp. I am bound to a greater and all-encompassing truth, which is beyond my comprehension. I must therefore accept more and more of the absolute truth that is revealed from above. One who follows the path of truth will certainly be a vessel to receive the truth. So, you know, this reminds me of the Gemara that says, you know, point yourself in the direction you want to go and God will take you there. So if you point yourself in the direction of truth, then God will take you there, meaning he will make you a vessel that can receive truth. So one who follows the path of truth will certainly be a vessel to receive the truth of the Torah, because he knows that his understanding is limited. It's humility. And the truth is not defined within his mind. We're going to learn about this as we get more in a few, I think maybe number 9, we're going to talk about this, that when you recognize, and you really can get that here it's limited, my mind is limited, then you open your mind up to receiving beyond your limits the truth, which is only can come from the Torah, which is the written Torah and the oral Torah. Any Judaism without accepting that the oral law and the written law, meaning the written Torah and then the oral transmission that eventually was written down, the Mishnah, the Gemara, any Judaism that doesn't include that as from God, min hashemayim, from the heavens, from God, is not Judaism. And as my teacher says, no apologies here. It's just the truth. I mean, Judaism that's what it is. Our Torah, that's what makes us Jews. And so being able to access that, we can access that. And that's where we don't come to it with our own agenda. We come to it that's where my agenda comes from. And then I use that to assess everything else around me, right? So it's a closed system of knowing where the truth lies and only accessing it from there and becoming a vessel to be able to access more and more truth. Because the truth is not defined within my mind. The truth is there's a true north, right? Which is the Torah. And it's not from my mind, it's from there. No matter what my mind thinks, this is what is true. With this approach to wisdom, the person submits his intellect to the absolute truth that was revealed in the Torah and the words of the prophets. And we're going to cover all of this in the tenets because they are part of the 13 principles. This is why Rambam says that we may not wander after our heart because, quote, the comprehension of humans, man, is limited. He means that man can only understand a part of existence. While it is true that a greater mind can comprehend a great part, and that the intellect always continues to delve deeper and deeper to uncover more layers, true existence is concealed and has no end. When a person realizes that he lacks the ability to grasp it, he recognizes the necessity of accepting wisdom from a higher place. It's like when you realize, oh, I really can't access this with my own. I'm never going to rise above being human, right? And this is beyond human. It really is supernatural. I mean, it's pretty amazing, actually. So we have to accept the wisdom from a higher source, which is revealed through the Torah and the prophets, and immersing himself in revealing the legacy of the essential truth. So basically what we want to be is truth seekers. That really is what our mission should be, is just to be truth seeker. And we're going to start doing that through we're going to start with the first tenet, the first principle, the source of all sources, God's being. So what's the first principle? I believe without reservation. So it says, anima amen. So we usually say, I believe with complete faith. But listen how he's translating it. Without reservation. What is faith? We've discussed this. What is Emunah? Emunah it's not faith. What's faith, right? Emunah is absolute no reservation that the Torah is true 100% and Hashem is the oneness of everything and everything comes from that. Like that's Emunah. Emunah is no reservation about this, okay? So he translates it. I believe without reservation that the Creator, blessed is his name, creates and guides all of creation, and that he alone made, makes, and will make everything. The use of the Hebrew word ikar for tenet originates in the way the term is used in Chazal, in the sages' thumbnail description of a person who does not believe in God. They call him a kofer be'ikar, a denier of the source. Ikar is the source here. This term implies that there is a being who is the source and foundation of all of existence. That source is the ikar, the essence. Ikar is like essence. Similarly, the phrase kofer ikar implies that there is only one basic tenet, one ikar, one essence, essential truth. If so, how did the Rambam come up with 13? The answer to this question is obvious and can be found in the works of earlier commentators. They explain that more than one ikar is simply not possible. In like yeshiva talk, they'll say ikar, right? Ikar, more than one ikar, but it's or we'll say the ikrim, the 13 principles, the 13 ikrim. It's in Hebrew, in modern Hebrew way you pronounce it is ikar. They explain that more than one ikar is simply not possible. There is only one basic principle, just as the Rambam states. He states, quote, anyone who thinks that there is another God besides this one has denied the source, and this is the great principle that everything depends on. And that's in Hilchos Yesodei HaTorah 1:6. One second. Okay. All righty. The enumeration of the 13 tenets is intended to show the different facets or extensions of the main principle. So I like to think of it like the sun and the rays of the sun. And I think I might have said this last week even, the sun and the rays of the sun, and the rays of the sun are part of the sun. They're just extensions of the sun. So there's one sun though, right? So there's one essential basic tenet, and these other 12 are going to be kind of extensions, elaborations on them. Okay, so there are different facets or extensions of the main principle. Indeed, it is no accident that there are actually 13 tenets. Oh, wait, hold on. I'm looking at a chat. There's a chat comment coming in. Yeah, so it's, I don't, is there a root of ikar found in apikors as an anti-ikar? Ikar, apikar. Oh, apikar. Oh, that's amazing. I'm going to look into that. Opposite of the ikar. Interesting. I like that. So apikoros, apikor, it has ikar in it. Interesting. I like that. I'm going to ask my teacher. Okay. The brilliance of my students who are really my teachers. Okay, here we go. Okay, the different facets of the main principles. Indeed, it is no accident that there are exactly 13 tenets. 13 is the numerical value of the Hebrew word for one, echad, symbolizing the unity of the 13 tenets and the fact that they all combine to clarify the oneness of God's existence. Through all of them, we are able to recognize God's oneness. So through each one, we're going to recognize the oneness of God, which we're discussing in the first principle. The core principle is that all of existence, from beginning to end, is a single entity created by him, and nothing exists without his will, without God's will. One single existence is the essence of everything, and that is the great being. And you know, in physics and science today, they're getting close, right? They know that there is the theory of everything. What is the essence of everything? And they're getting close. I think they've gotten down to 4 things. There used to be so much more, so many more things. Now it's down to 4, and I can't even name all of them. Electromagnetism. I can't think of what they are, but there's 4 kind of core things, and they know that there's even they can distill that down, and they're looking for the one thing that they can distill it down into. And we know what it is. It's God. In other words, God alone exists, and he is not he, meaning God. We're just using the he as a name, but God is not a he or a she. It's not a gender specific. It's just not. It's beyond that. And he is not dependent on any other being. God is existence itself. It's existence itself. That it is existence. That's what God is. If we fail to recognize this fact, then we will cease to exist. It's literally the womb, the mother's womb. The fetus can the mother can survive without the fetus, but the fetus cannot survive without the mother, right? Where the fetus in the womb itself. That's what the olam is, the womb. God is this womb, and we're the fetus. And God can exist without us, but we cannot exist without God. If we fail to recognize this fact, then we will cease to exist. All existence is due to and emanates from his absolute being, because he wanted this creation, he created it, and sustains it. Since all of existence is actually one entity, everything that occurs in the world must reflect this unity that is based on his will. Any action that does not fulfill his will contradicts existence. Anyone who denies the main principle of God's being excludes himself from the one and only existence, and therefore ceases to be. It's, I'm just thinking, like, if somebody did a magic trick, and there's like, they show you, a hat, and it has something inside it, and they take the hat away, right? We know that if you take the hat away, the stuff that's in the hat is going to go with it. But like magic, they'll somehow leave the eggs or the whatever, the scarves there, even though they took the hat away. It's magic. It's pretend. It's a visual optical illusion. We know it's not the truth. So it's just like that. It's like to think that you could take away the thing that's holding us and still exist. It's an illusion. It can't be. Okay, since all existence is actually one entity, okay, so everything has to reflect it. Anyone who denies the main principle of God's being, excludes himself from the one and only existence, and therefore ceases to be. All of the 13 tenets come to reinforce the primary tenet that all of existence and whatever happens and whatever comes into being are all one whole that reflects God's will. The 13 tenets help us recognize God's existence within the physical world. So the 13 tenets help us recognize God's existence within the physical world. What is this telling us? This is telling us, Rav Moshe is telling us that, and the Rambam, as he's talking about the Rambam's points and the Rav Moshe's points about the Rambam 13, is that we have an opportunity to look into the world, like Avraham Avinu looked into the world and he saw Hashem. He saw God. There was no Torah to guide him to say, oh, by the way, there's a God, right? He looked into the Torah. He looked into the world and he saw Hashem. He looked at the creation and he saw the creator. This is what it's telling us. We have an opportunity to look into the world and see Hashem's existence in the world, because everything is going to express that existence. And so these principles are going to help us. They're a tool for us to be able to recognize God in the world. We discussed previously that the teaching of Chazal of the sages, we're going to discuss how you become a chacham, a wise, really knowledgeable Torah, that everything is Torah. Your own agenda isn't there, and then you have the ability to actually come up with new ideas, but the new ideas are within the closed system of Torah. No new idea would ever be outside or against a principle of Torah, because by definition, in order to even be able to do that, your whole system is that everything you get is from Torah. So everything you produce is going to be from Torah. And that's why we know that, for example, Christianity can't possibly be true, because we know that you can't change anything. A prophet can't go and change things that were written down in the Torah. You can't do it. So the fact that Jesus changed things is enough. Well, Paul probably did it, but that is enough to go, well, wait a second, that right now, that's a litmus test. So, okay. Okay, all of the 13 tenets come to reinforce the primary tenet that all of existence and whatever happens and whatever comes into being are all one whole that reflects God's will. The 13 tenets help us recognize God's existence within the physical world. We discussed previously that the teaching of Chazal, the sages, that the litmus test of Emunah is being able to declare without reservation, right? That's Emunah, without reservation. This is my God, and I will build him a sanctuary. That's from Shemos, the book of Exodus. This means that I have to be able to point to him facing me. And that is why I will make him a sanctuary. If God forbid we close our eyes to the divine spirit permeating the world and see our existence as operating without God's presence, this is a denial of the basic tenet. But to make a home for Hashem in the physical world, all of the 13 tenets are needed. Okay? If God forbid we close our eyes to the divine spirit permeating the world and see our existence as operating without God's presence, that we're independent, which is ludicrous because we can't exist without God, but we are given this illusion that we are. And that's the part that is so challenging to being a human being. You know, I always say like this human thing is like really annoying sometimes, right? Because I get the illusion that I'm separate. And when you're separate, guess what? You get afraid of being alone. And then you go into survivor mode and you do all sorts of things to try to protect yourself. But when we know that we cannot exist, that we are not independent of God, that we have a perception of independence, but we are not actually ever alone, then we can operate with just ease, really. But we need, but to make a home for Hashem in the physical world, all of the 13 tenets are needed. You can't even possibly make a home for Hashem in the world without these 13 tenets, because you would otherwise think, because without them, you think you're independent of God, and it just doesn't work. Okay, the generation of the dispersion. Oh, this is like so great. I spoke about this on Rosh Hashanah. In order to fully understand what our belief in God demands, we must contemplate the inverse, the rejection of God's primacy. As the Torah tells us, this first occurred in the generation of the dispersion, the Dor Haflaga, the Tower of Babel, that period of time. Okay, this comes from Genesis 11, chapter 11, Bereshit, chapter 11. The entire earth was of one language and a common purpose. When they migrated from the east, they found a valley in the land of Shinar and settled there. They said to one another, "Come, let us mold bricks and bake them in fire." The bricks served them as stone and the clay as mortar. Then they said, "Come, let us build for ourselves a town and a tower with its top in heaven, and let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be scattered over the face of all the earth." Rashi explains that their common purpose, they claimed that it was not fair that God chose the heavens for himself. Okay, this is the generation of Babel, Bavel. And, we say when we're babbling, we're not making any sense, because that came from the Tower of Babel, because you're going to see what happened, what God does. Okay. So their common purpose, okay, they claimed that it was not fair. Okay, here. Then they said, "Come, let us build for ourselves a tower, a town, and a tower with its top in heaven, and let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be scattered over the face of all the earth." They were upset that God took heaven just for himself. Thus, they plan to ascend to the heavens and wage war against Hashem. That's what Rashi is. Rashi is the shot, the base, simple explanation of the sentence. The Torah is not, you must read behind the lines, not even between them. And where we read behind the lines is through our sages who are able to interpret it, and which is divinely inspired. Okay, so they were going to wage war. So this is what they were united around. They were united around this idea that we're going to wage war against Hashem, against God, because we're going to build a tower that reaches up to where he is, and we're going to go head to head with him. It should be noted that the land of Shinar was the place where all of the corpses of the flood ended up. So the flood, Noah's flood, they all ended in that area. The people of the generation of the dispersion, the Dor HaFlaga, chose to settle there because they wanted to learn from the mistakes that they thought brought on the flood. Their goal was the same as that of the previous generation, to reject God's rule. They felt, however, that a better plan was needed. Their evil plan is captured in the words, "Let us make a name for ourselves." They intended to remove the name of Hashem of the heavens and to replace it with their names. Okay? Now, it is clear that waging a war against Hashem is sheer stupidity, not at all appropriate for a generation of people so intelligent that they were able to tap into the secrets of the mystical wisdom. The Zohar says this generation was they had such abilities that they could tap into mystical wisdom. If so, we must understand their plan, how they expected to accomplish it, and how they imagined they could rid the world of the Almighty's kingdom. We can glean from the teachings of Chazal that the generation of the dispersion wanted to organize the laws of nature according to their will and not to have to accept God's eminence. The king who initiated the building of the tower was Nimrod. The Gemara quotes Hashem as saying, I gave greatness to Nimrod, and he said, let us build a city, meaning that Nimrod wanted to foment a rebellion against Hashem, as we will explain. The basis of their evil thoughts was to unite all the people around the banner of building a city and a tower with the goal of preventing the civilized world from being scattered. It looks like a noble cause, right? We want to gather everybody. We don't want anyone to be scattered. A city is the place where people gather together to live, and the tower is what unites them. The Hebrew word for tower, migdal, which incorporates the letters of the Hebrew word for flag, degel, with the letter mem added. Their goal was to unite mankind around one purpose, the rejection of God's will. They thought this plan could succeed because it actually is founded on the truth that all of existence is one entity, because it is all an expression of the will of God. Yet God gave man the power to choose his path and define his existence according to his own will. Do you hear this? This is a secret that we must know. It's not a secret, but it feels like a secret because people don't really get this, okay? Here's the deal. You can't really exist very well, living truly well. I don't mean financially. I don't mean in the materialism of the world. I mean eternally and fully to what we are capable of. A tselem Elokim, someone that's made in the image and likeness of God. Okay, if you don't live with the knowledge, the pervasive knowledge that all of existence exists only because of God, including ourselves, okay? You don't really function that well. But God didn't create us to be robots. He wanted us to choose this. So we have the choice to live as if God's in charge or to live as if God's not in charge. But God's always in charge. But you get to decide how you're going to live. Are you going to live like he is, or are you going to live like he isn't? When you live like he isn't, it's not as full of an existence. It's not going to go as well in the long run. Okay. Let me find my place. Right? That God gave man power to choose his path and define his existence according to his own will. If the people of that generation would have united in a common cause in their city and instituted a new world order, then they would have defined existence according to their view. Okay, so they all were going to unify around this, all of them, and define a new world order. That would have turned everything upside down on its head, because that is not how things run. So since this is not, right, so they would have defined existence according to their view, right? Since it is not possible that there can be two types of existence in the world, they thought that they could force God to want their existence. Hey, God, we have a better idea than you. Did you ever do that? Did you ever be like, well, God, I like my idea better, right? No, it never works that way, ever. It took me a long time to know. I always say, I was just talking to a friend actually on the way home from where I was seeing a client, and she had something that she felt like she was so happy about. And I said, isn't it nice when we get hugs that actually feel like hugs as opposed to the hugs that feel like pinches? Because they're all hugs. That's something we need to know. It's not in 13 tenets, but it is in a sense. They're all hugs. We just don't necessarily perceive it as a hug, right? So sometimes something will feel like a pinch and I'll be like, well, that was a bad idea, God. No. It's never a bad idea. This is the unshakable, no reservation attitude that we want to have. Okay. Since it's not possible that there can be two types of existence in the world, they thought that they could force God to want their existence. This was their evil intention. The will of God is based on the world below. Thus, if everyone in the generation of the dispersion would have been unified around a common goal, so here, the will of God is based on the reality of the world below. So Hashem is going to respond according to how we're living. Thus, if everyone in the generation of the dispersion would have been unified around a common goal, this would have been the reality of the generation and would have, so to speak, caused, so to speak, Hashem to adopt this reality for the world. They reasoned that man had the ability to join together around a common cause, represented by the tower, to force God into agreeing with their worldview. As the Torah puts it, behold, they are one people with one language, and this is what they have begun to do. Like they're unified. They're unified around this. This is what they're all getting together about, to go against me. This is what you're utilizing unity for. Now they will not be prevented from anything that they designed to do. If you all get together, you become one on something. They're going to have to live in a different kind of existence. They're going to do what they want. That's not going to go very well. But they miscalculated. True, the scenario of unity and human harmony that they envisioned could have, so to speak, forced their will on God, but they miscalculated because there is no tower in the world that can unite man independent of God, because nothing exists independent of God. So you can't create something but this was what they were thinking. When Hashem declared, let us descend and jumble their language so that they will not comprehend each other's language, he revealed that true unity among people is not possible if it centers on something physical. If mankind wants to strive for unity, it is achievable only by turning to the one above and accepting his sovereignty. Everything that originates here in the physical world is inherently divided and separated. Around a tower that is part of the physical world, unity of the global village is not attainable. This is the significance of jumbling their language, so that there was no common language to unite the world. This created a separation that reflected man's innate division in the physical world. Without recognizing God's oneness, there cannot be uncompromised communication and unity among all individuals. I'm going to end because I have a meeting right after this, but I want to say this one thing and then we'll pick it up next week. This gave me such peace of mind, how people can disagree on such huge issues. Look at the world that we just, the year that we just went through, and just even elections and things like that, how half the country can think one thing so strongly, and the other half can think, the United States I'm talking about, can think the exact opposite and say it with the same conviction. No matter what, I would see clients at 2 o'clock, I'd be with one and they were like, how could they think this? And then I would go at 3 o'clock to this next person and they'd be like, how could they think that? This is why there's always going to be differences of opinion. The only thing that we can unite around is the oneness of God. When we do that, then the world will be a place that we really truly want to live in, can thrive in, and can utilize, and can really unite the entire world. That's the mission of the Jewish people, to spread this message so that the whole world can get on the bandwagon. They don't have to be Jewish. You don't have to be Jewish, just to recognize the oneness of God, that there's one creator, sustainer. And please God, that should be very soon. We're hopefully there very, very soon. So I will see you all next week. If you have any questions or comments or whatever, send me an email or a text, WhatsApp, and I will see you next week. Bye, everybody.